U.S. President Donald Trump has made it clear.
We didn't give it to China, we gave it to Panama.
South America is near the top of his agenda. The reason, he says, is the threat of China's growing influence there.
China got its hands in some major projects across South America in recent years. They're snapping up lithium reserves in Argentina, in Chile, and Bolivia. Over in Brazil, state giants have poured billions of dollars into deep sea oil infrastructure. They're all over it.
Meanwhile, the U.S. has fallen behind with its investments in the continent.
In the last 20 years, it has been slowly displaced by China.
So, why have the U.S. and China battled for influence in South America?
我们要为促进南美地区同中国的互联互通做出重要贡献。
China's involvement in South America took off in 2001 when it joined the World Trade Organization.
They focused initially on oil and gas and agricultural sectors. But as time went by, the profile of the Chinese economy started to change, and so did the sectors in which they invested abroad.
Today, China primarily invests in energy and transport, everything from wind and solar power grids to high-speed trains, electric vehicles, and mineral mines. Between 2000 and 2020, Chinese trade with Latin America and the Caribbean grew more than 26-fold, from $12 billion to $315 billion.
By the 2010s, the Belt and Road Initiative kicked things up another notch, funding even more projects.
21 of 26 eligible Latin America and Caribbean nations have joined China's Belt and Road Initiative, a trade program proposed by Chinese President Xi Jinping in 2013 to link economies into a China-centered trading network. Panama was the first Latin American country to join the Belt and Road in 2017. China proposed building a high-speed railway and container port, but the projects were later suspended because of pressure from the U.S. and Panamanian claims that China violated a contract by not investing enough in local labor. In February 2025, Panama became the first country in the region and second country ever to quit China's initiative.
¿Eso qué ha traído para Panamá en todos estos años? ¿Cuáles son las grandes cosas que esa Belt and Road Initiative ha traído al país?
The Panama Canal is one of the most critical waterways on the planet. It has played that role since it was built over the course of a decade starting in 1904, ultimately providing a shortcut between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. The U.S. benefits most, with nearly 75% of the canal's cargo traffic passing to and from American ports. China is a strong second, accounting for 21% of the cargo volume transiting the route. The Trump administration recently threatened to retake the waterway, citing concerns that China had too much influence over it.
Look, the Panama Canal is vital to our country. It's being operated by China. China!
But some experts say Trump's strong-arm approach will not be enough to wrest back China's influence elsewhere.
As China influences more countries in the region, the Chinese way of doing business and the Chinese way of managing the economy also start to become more attractive.
I just love Peru so much. I love Peruvian people.
Beijing has offered to invest $250 billion in South America by the end of the decade.
China has invested around 72 billion USD in Brazil in the last 20 years, from 2004 to 2024. Peru received around 29 billion, and then you have Chile with around 18 billion, Argentina with 13 billion.
China has this top-down structure and the way state companies work. It is much faster and much more effective in realizing these investments.
Take the Chancay megaport in Peru, hailed as the gateway to Asia.
Necesitamos mayor colaboración y entendimiento y menos fragmentación.
The Chancay megaport opened in November 2024 after 5 years of construction.
首先，我谨对前海港顺利开港表示热烈祝贺。
The facility was jointly funded by China's COSCO Shipping and Peru's Volcan Mining. It has cut shipping time to and from the Indo-Pacific from an average of 45 days to about 20.
Este puerto va a significar el ingreso del Asia, no solamente de China, del Asia. Hoy día no existen rutas establecidas ni del Callao ni de Chile.
Infrastructure projects like this have raised major concerns for Washington, not only economically, but militarily.
Team democracy that I'm looking at is much stronger than our enemies of autocracy. And I am proud to serve with you, and I am proud to be here today.
But many experts say the U.S. threat assessment does not align with reality.
U.S. military influence over Latin America has been preponderant, and China is not threatening the U.S. militarily on the hemisphere. However, if you take together a more encompassing view of power with economic influence, logistics, and technology as well, then you start to see the reason why Washington might be more concerned.
The West often raises the term debt trap to deter its allies from making deals with China, and Sri Lanka's Hambantota port is usually cited as an example.
We want to make sure that the people of Sri Lanka have the capacity to execute their sovereign rights, to remain independent. The Chinese have a very different vision.
Sri Lanka used Chinese loans to build the port starting in 2008. In 2017, Sri Lanka could no longer afford to repay its debt and was forced to hand over Hambantota and surrounding land to China on a 99-year lease. But Beijing has since changed the way it conducts business.
This whole narrative around that trap, I think it has been debunked by academia, but for some reason politicians insist on continuing with this line of argument. China hasn't actually seized any assets in South America like it did with Sri Lanka, for example, and instead it's being very flexible, renegotiating debts rather than forcing defaults. In general, countries that do business with China, most of the times, I think they're well informed about the risks.
But new business could spell a decline for old ones. Fishermen in Peru have said they are being forced further out to sea for their daily catch.
Los puntos pesqueros ya no existen, porque ellos los han encerrado. Han destruido el cerro. Ahí llegaba la corvina, la chita, toda clase de pescado.
The construction of ports like this also requires dredging the coastal sea floor, disrupting marine ecosystems and affecting indigenous communities.
México dice que ellos van a salvar el planeta. Salvarán el planeta, pero tienen que sacrificar a nosotros.
To offset such environmental destruction, China is the largest foreign investor in sustainable energy projects in the area. The U.S., meanwhile, is falling billions of dollars behind.
Climate, maybe, depending if the Trump administration continues the way it's going forward, it might cause problems in its relations with Latin America.
Topping Trump's agenda are moves to pull out of multilateral agreements focused on tackling climate change, including the Paris Agreement.
The Paris Accord was not designed to save the environment. It was designed to kill the American economy.
As well as deporting undocumented immigrants from the U.S.
They are now strongly embedded in our country, but we are getting them out and getting them out fast.
The latter policy heavily affects Cuban and Venezuelan migrants. In turn, it has opened doors for China.
Who are China's biggest allies in Latin America? I think the obvious answer would be Venezuela and Cuba.
So as Trump shuts South American partners out, China gains a stronger foothold in the region. Public perception in the area has changed over time as Chinese migrants have integrated with South American communities and pushed for cultural exchange. Confucius Institutes have opened across over 20 countries in the region with the explicit purpose of helping the world better understand Chinese culture and its present day.
It seems like the U.S. relied on the fact that there were common values and many of these countries are democratic, and so we have a historical partnership. However, Latin America remains a developing region, and these countries have pressing issues with trying to become more industrialized and to develop their technology.
So really, it all becomes a balancing act.
The general strategy throughout the whole region has been taking China's money while keeping U.S. relations ice.